Now that we have the dependency service completely implemented on Android as well, all we have to do now is actually start to use it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and bind a new command inside of my categories VM. So I am going to be creating a new property that is going to be a command that is going to be called export command. And all this is going to do, and let me just go ahead and initialize the export command to a new command, is going to execute our share report method. So I will just assign that as the action that needs to be executed when the command is fired. And so now that I have this new command, I can navigate over to my views to the categories page, where I already have the VM, by the way, and just add something new inside of this content page. So to the content page toolbar items, I'm going to be defining a new toolbar item. And this toolbar item is going to have, let's add it some text of export. Of course, I could always set an icon. Let me just go ahead and set the text in here, and I will set the command. And the command is of course going to be binding. The source is going to be a static resource, and the path is going to be this new export command that we have just defined. So my command is ready, and now the method should execute whenever I press that toolbar item. Now the next thing that I have to do, actually in this method, I am going to be creating a new file inside of a new folder. Now it is quite easy to create new folders and actually get folders that correspond to wherever we're working with, either on Android and iOS, without needing to do complicated things, just by adding one Node.js package. Like I've said before, some packages or Xamarin has been hard at work at creating some very powerful packages. So not all the time we need to add dependency services and stuff like that. For us to be able to get a folder, we just need to add the PCL storage package. This one by Daniel Placed, one that has over 800,000 downloads. So this one, I'm going to add it to my project. I'm going to accept the license, and once this has been added, I will be able to create an iFolder variable. Of course, to be able to use this type is added using directive to PCL storage, which is precisely what we just imported. And the first thing that I will get is the root folder. Now the root folder is actually, let me define a variable first. I am going to define an iFileSystem variable. That is going to be my file system. And we are just going to get the current file system. So there is a file system type, and I can just get current. So there is this file system type, and I can just get the current file system. And so from file system, which is my variable, I will be able to access the local storage. And this is going to be my root folder. Having my root folder, I can create yet another folder that is going to be my reports folder. And all I'm going to do is, inside of this root folder, create a folder, asynchronously, by the way. And all I have to do is write the name of the folder, which, remember that I set this to be reports on Android. It's important that I set the exact same thing, because on my XML I did set this. And I am going to create with the option to open if it already exists. So of course the first time, and by the way, let me just await this, which will mean that my method has to be async. But the first time this is going to be created, the second time this is just going to be opened, and either way it's going to be assigned to the reports folder variable. And now that I have the folder, I can go ahead and create my txt file, which now is going to be inside of the reports folder. And the reports folder is going to have the create file async, for which I am going to need the name. Let's just call it report.txt. And the option for when it already exists is going to be just to replace it. So we're only going to have one. Of course, here you could have your own functionality. I only want to have one report at a time. If it already exists, I'm just going to replace it. And this is pretty much everything that we need to create the file. In fact, we could already go ahead and send whatever we want to the show method. Now in the first one, if you remember, we are going to be requesting the title. So let's just set the title to here is your report, or let's just call it expense report. And the message is going to be here is your expense report. And over here, the third string is going to be the txt file's path. And actually, I am missing the await in here. That's why I don't have access to path, because txt file wasn't the file. So here it is, the path. And now we would be able to just test this out. But of course, our txt file would currently be empty. So what I have to do is actually write something to it. And I will do it inside of a using statement. And inside of the using, I'm going to be defining a new stream writer. To be able to use a stream writer, I will need to add a using directive to system.io. And so this stream writer, which I'm going to call SW, is going to be equal to a new stream writer for my txt file.path. So it's going to go ahead and open this file, create a stream for us to write on the file, and so we are now able to write inside of it, which means that we will now be able to iterate through the observable collection of category expenses and add whatever we want to the report. So let me go ahead and do that iteration. I am going to go ahead and grab each of the category expenses in the category expenses collection, and to my txt file for each iteration, I'm going to use DSW to write a new line, which is simply going to contain a couple of values in here. And so I will use this C# notation to write first the category and then just the expenses percentage. So hopefully this is not weird for you. We're just iterating through the observable collection that we already had, and we are just writing a new line for each of these categories into the txt file. And of course, because we are inside of a using statement, the stream writer is going to be closed by the end, and we will be able to just send the path as always. Now let me go ahead and test this on Android first. On Android, what I will have to do before testing it, and I have done this before, but if you haven't, you have to make sure that you have signed in. The more straightforward way is to just sign in with your Google account, so you have access to Gmail or you have access to Google Drive, because those are applications that are already natively installed on these Android emulators, so that is going to be quite handy as we export this file. So let me actually go ahead and export my file. Actually, I have a breakpoint in here. Let me just continue with the execution. And over here, we see precisely those applications that are here installed by default. So this is why it's important for you to sign in first. So if I go ahead and save this to my drive, I can change the title of my document. Let's just call this report, click on save, and it's going to go ahead and upload it to my drive. We saw that small message there for a second. And in the notification center, we see that the file has been uploaded. We can click on this notification, see that the report is right here, and the report is going to have precisely all of these items. Now, it is not showing this on percentage. Maybe I should do that, but you can see how all of them have 0% except for food that has 100%. So there you go. On Android, it's already working. Now let me go ahead and change this to actually be percentage by writing this when writing or passing these to a string. And let's go ahead and test on iOS. Now on iOS, I actually have to test this on my iPhone, because for some reason the simulators, at least in the current state of the brand new Xcode 10 for iOS 12, this is not entirely working. It tries to save two TXT files, and only the first one gets saved, and the first one actually contains the title that we're sending, because if you remember on iOS, what we have over here in the share class is that we are going to be sharing first a string and then, well, an object and then an NS URL. For some reason in the simulator this is not working. But let me go ahead and test this on my physical device. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the screen of my phone right here, and let's just wait for the application to run. And here the application is running. We see that in this case all of them seem to be the same. Let me go ahead and add some expenses, so this is actually doing something. Let's add this to one category, and so we now have at least one category with one value. Let's go ahead and export this. Of course, because this is my phone, I have a little bit more of applications installed here. Let's just go ahead and save to files, which is a native application that you could also test on the simulator, but again, the simulator for some reason is not working very well. I will just save this on my iCloud drive right here. I will hit an add, and this is going to go ahead and do the same thing. Now let me go ahead and search for my file application, and over here in my iCloud drive I now find this report, which now notice is showing things on percentage, and we see the same result that we just did on Android. So there you have it. This is how you will be able to run this on both Android and iOS and be able to share a file. And the more important thing in here is not really the file sharing, but the fact that we have implemented this sharing natively for both Android and iOS using dependency services. So this has been it for this section on dependency services. In the next section, we're going to take a look at behaviors and effects. So we're going to be working with how to further customize elements that we defined on SAML with behaviors and effects, which in many scenarios is just going to be quite useful for our users.